Hear the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Now Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod. Suddenly, sages from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the one born King of the Judeans? For we have seen his star at its ascent and have come to reverence him." When King Herod heard this, he was shaken, and all Jerusalem with him. Then calling together all the chief priests and religious scholars of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah would be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, by no means are least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the sages and learned from them the time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go, search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and reverence him." When they had heard the king, they left, and there suddenly was the star that they had seen at its ascent going before them, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they rejoiced. Their joy was exuberant. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and reverenced him. Then opening their treasure, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the gospel of the Lord. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Imagine if the sages, the magi, if they had not heeded the warning they received in a dream, and had said instead, "Let's go back the usual way. I know it's best. We can stop by my auntie's house. She always feeds us. It also shaves an hour and a half off our journey." This is the kind of thinking we must guard against. Deciding what we do going forward as a church, as a people, as a country, we must go another way. This pandemic, this moment in history, has made it abundantly clear that gathering indoors, in person, in large groups especially, is unwise and unsafe, just as taking the old road home would have been unsafe for the three sages. And we are seeing the effects all around us of those who insist in doing what they are comfortable doing instead of taking a new road or doing new things that require adjustments and commitments and self-sacrifice, things that have the potential to save us all. I have been at King of Kings, now Be Ye Lifted Online Church, a little more than 5 years now. This week we lost Sidney Poitier, the first Black performer to win the Academy Award for Best Actor for Lilies of the Field. I remember watching that film with my oldest son Adam when he was 10 years old. We were surrounded by boxes as we are about to embark on our move to Columbus, Ohio, so that I could go to seminary. Lilies of the Field, as you know, is the story of this Black man, portrayed by Sidney Poitier, who helps a bunch of nuns build a church. When the movie was over and the credits were rolling and Amen was still being sung on the screen, Adam turned to me and said, "Is that what we're going to do? Are we going to build a church, Mom?" And I remember saying, "I hope not. I hope we go where one already exists." In 2002, I started at the church where I would have my first call. We built a church together. They had 10 acres of beautiful land, but they were at the time worshiping in an elementary school gym where every Sunday we set up 100 folding chairs and rolled out an altar. And so in my 7 years at that church, we did in fact build a church. The whole experience was odd. In seminary, I continued to have this vision of a church without walls, a church that was visible to people in the neighborhood. It was literally transparent so that those who we might want to come could do so easily without having to worry about what might or might not happen if they dared to step inside a church building. Some will have had harsh experiences in the church and so were afraid. Others maybe had harsh experiences in their lives and had a sense of guilt or shame that was put on them, and they were afraid to enter what we deem a holy space. Some had social anxieties that made it so painful to try to engage with people they didn't know. Others had physical needs that made them feel leery about being in a place where it would be hard to leave if they needed to. These are the kinds of things that we, the church, have not been mindful of all these years. By having church services inside buildings, where people that we keep wanting to come may or may not know what to expect, may or may not have their needs accommodated, we weren't taking seriously what their needs really were. At the second church I was at, I suggested when I left, we celebrated their 175th anniversary as a church together, as a congregation. And when I left in 2016 or 2015, they had a food pantry, and people would line up all the way down the block to come to that food pantry. When I left them, I suggested that would be their next outreach, that they would use the land next to the church and build a big food pantry. Clearly, it was a need in this community. This past year, during COVID-19, that church did that very thing. It is beautiful, it is big, and the people there can receive more dignity in the way they receive their food because they have choices when they go in. The third church that I was at had a preschool. There were some issues with the preschool, mainly by the person that was a superintendent. She stepped down and someone else took her place, and together we built that preschool up with outdoor classrooms, outdoor gardens that the children tended, a huge mural on an outdoor wall of a small town with all that goes with it. And at the bottom of that mural, we put a sandbox and trucks so that they could pretend they were part of the town. The significant part was that it was all outside. Now, granted, it was also in Florida where you can be outside more. And yet still, this is part of what we are being called to creation care, to using the great outdoors, to stop hiding in the safety of buildings. In this church, King of Kings Lutheran in Ann Arbor, which has morphed into also having Be Lifted Online Church, as I grew with the people here, I noticed things and I wondered how they would lead to our ultimate mission together. I thought, why aren't these tremendous musicians playing for all the world every week? I thought, why did the drama ministry that was once going great guns here, why did it stop when there is so much dramatic talent in these folks and drama is such a helpful way to tell the story? I thought, how does the neighborhood, the people that live around the church, how do they know that this is a church that is serious about inclusivity, that works on ourselves to work on racism, that works on societal issues of justice and attends marches, that attends lectures and supports local and national efforts to welcome immigrants and affirm love in all its possibilities. I wondered about our relationship with the Mullen Nature Center, which is behind our church on our land, on the land, and about how we could I also wondered about how could we take more precautions during worship a couple years ago when it seemed that church shootings were trending. At a time of COVID, when we are all so weary, it probably seems like too much to redirect the mission of a church. But I guarantee that even though we are tired, that we, as individuals who are well knit into this beloved community of faith, we together have the gifts and talents to fine-tune a vision I'm going to describe to you and make it a reality. We have right here, and as part of our online church, which includes people who do not even live in this state, we have gifts of teaching, music, craftsmanship, technology, medicine, art, interior design. We have a chaplain, 3 to 5 clergy overall and biblical scholars, administrative wizards, well, a couple of them, we probably could use a couple more, and many who are passionate about creation care. We have people in recovery, people who lead recovery groups. We have people who are well acquainted with life, loving a disabled or energy depleting child or parent, people whose parents have died or are sick, and someone in the family who is too young to be vaccinated. All of these people are in this beloved community of faith. And the dividing line between them and people that they have loved is as strained as it is in your families too. One of the things that has happened as part of our trauma in the last few years is something sociologists are calling the Great Resignation. People are resigning from professions we need them to occupy. Doctors, nurses, teachers, administrators, bus drivers, and clergy. This year, our synod, 126 churches in Southeast Michigan, received in the annual draft one seminary graduate for maybe 30 different churches in need of a pastor. Let me be clear, I am not leaving. I love Be Lifted, and I love King of Kings, and I certainly love the people that are involved with it. I am committed, though, to walking with you into the something new that God is revealing in our midst. And I am also committed to not going backward into habits for the sake of comfort, and instead leading forward for the sake of faith. We need to ask ourselves, church, where have we seen God, and where do the stories we have to tell about the last 2 years offer guidance about where God is leading us right now? Because we do know this, we are to go home by another road, not because we necessarily want to, but because we must, because it is safest for all, and because God is revealing things to us on this new road that we need to hear, we need to know. Here is God's presence in our midst. A few things happened this week. We found out that many of the support groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and others, Alzheimer's support groups, they use our building between Sundays. And we've been asked by a few new groups if they could become regulars using our building. We had to cancel today's indoor worship that was scheduled. We've only been worshiping indoors once a month on the second Sunday. But the COVID numbers and the pleas from the hospital staff saying, please stay home, we cannot take any extra people, encouraged us to cancel in-person worship, which is why we're doing this today. Our Christmas Eve turnout, which was outside on Christmas Eve with electric candles to sing hymns, sing Silent Night, and hear the Christmas story around a big bonfire, was more successful than I ever dreamed. We had 118 people. I was expecting 30. And about half of them I didn't know well. They had come from the surrounding neighborhoods. They were friends of friends. They didn't care that it wasn't in the sanctuary, or maybe they did care and were relieved to be outside. There is a deep yearning for connection to people of faith and to God in a palpable way right now. Not being in our buildings does not mean we cannot make that happen. We have a prayer team at this church that has delivered gifts to homes all through the pandemic, including care packages, soup for the sick, and Holy Communion. But one thing kind of helped me to form this new vision, and that is this. This week I also had a conversation with someone who said she heard we were the only church in Ann Arbor who still wasn't back in worship regularly, and that we still weren't singing. Is that true? She said. And this was on Thursday, the day of the Epiphany. And this is where my vision kicked in. I thought, instead of continuing to be the church that seems to be lagging behind, the church that isn't singing, I suggest we turn the whole narrative on its head and own our decision to be vigilantly cautious about indoor gatherings by doing the things I'm about to describe to you and allowing God to work through us to create something new. Here is what that something new might look like. 1, worship. Of course we will worship. We are called to preach the gospel to all nations. We have dropped 106 episodes so far of this new church, Be Lifted Online, since March 2020. That does not include the sermon and a song videos that we drop weekly, or our podcasts, which also come out weekly and were coming out before the pandemic. But these 106 episodes have been viewed 18,000 times. The average viewing time is about 22 minutes, still longer than many. I suggest we go all in on creating Be Lifted online church and presence, that we invest time and money and people in continuing to help it evolve and to make those who create content for it more numerous and make it easier for them to send us content from wherever they are. I suggest we look into a way to make it easier to record multiple instruments and voices, and that we add some segments that have been rolling around in my mind that would help bridge the gap between lifelong churchgoers and newcomers who may not understand traditions or why we do things in the church or why we don't do those things anymore. I'd like to make sure that our website has a place where people can ask for more information, including being put on our email distribution list, so that when church changes, as it did today, we can make sure they know. Another nice thing about having an online church is that I can collaborate with other pastors for substitute preaching when I need a Sunday off for any reason. And those pastors don't have to be the one right next door. We can hear pastors from all over the United States, assuming they are willing to preach for us and send us the recording. When people ask you, where is your church? It used to be that you would tell them and they would immediately assess whether or not they could come or participate by where they lived. With Be Lifted Online Church, anywhere you can get online, we are there. There's an ability to retain members even if they move far away. We added members during this pandemic who don't live here. In the last year, I also thought that I was writing a book. I've written many chapters of a memoir, but on the day of Epiphany, I had this epiphany that it is we who are writing a book. We, the Be Lifted Online Church community, everyone who has sent us content, read lessons, read prayers, sent us musical contributions, photos and videos. We are writing a book, and the book is the story of the first couple years of this pandemic so far. Our Be Lifted videos document week to week things that are happening in our midst, like the abundance of masks cast out by the side of the road into the dirty snow, and how alarming that was when we first started seeing it. We have documented historical events like the largest Black Lives Matter march worldwide in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. We have documented Asian hate crimes and talked about where the gospel meets people of hate and the work that is required to truly love one another and be inclusive. And we have all this documented on Be Lifted Worship. And this is important because at some point we will be through this pandemic. And when that happens, there will be a call for artists who documented and created art that tells the story of what we are going through right now. That too is part of what we are doing together. And if you are watching this, you are in the we. Since January 1st, we've added more online options. We have a Genesis Bible study that is engrossing for 80 to 90 minutes with Steve Whiting, a professor from University of Michigan. We have a morning prayer at 9 a.m. on Zoom that is 20 minutes long, and we do that Monday through Thursday. I have Zoom office hours where I sit here and read, and people can just drop in if they want to or need to, and we can visit that way. All of these new ways of being church would be part of recommitting to our online presence. And instead of saying we're going to have a worship service in person and we'll put a video camera somewhere so people at home can watch us worship, Be Lifted and all of these things I'm describing are intentionally being made for everyone so that we all worship on level ground. So the first part of the vision has to do with expanding our online presence as Be Lifted. The second has to do with meeting in person. Of course we will meet in person when it is time and when we are able. We can connect outside. We would like to put together a task force at this church of people who will look at the vast amount of land on which our building stands and make a plan so that we can create outdoor gathering spaces for us and also for those in the neighborhood who walk by this church every day. We could add a band shell. We could build an amphitheater. We could make wider walkways on the lawn with lighting to accommodate wheelchairs. We could revisit the idea of a labyrinth, one that is maybe lit up at night. and look for a couple unusual playthings that we could put in the front yard for the children. There's talk of planting peace poles, which would have a scripture on the side of them, and maybe looking into a drinking fountain for the weary who walk by this way and need a drink. We are looking for different ways for all our many musicians and vocalists to be able to give concerts and to accompany outdoor worship with their voices outside. And then the third part of the vision has to do with the way that we serve. So far, we have been sort of juggling when we are in the building to worship and when our groups are in the building for their support meetings. I say that if for a few months anyway, we agree to expand our online presence and don't worry about having worship in the building, we could use more of the building for all of our support groups who so need to be meeting during this anxious and stressful time. We could accommodate them more fully. I want to close, and one more thing that I want to mention is that in an effort to live the gospel, we could do some more things that would let those on the front line of this pandemic know that the church is with them. We could send possibly a platter of sandwiches to different emergency rooms. From those who work in our hospitals, I have heard it is hard sometimes to even catch a 15-minute break to eat. And so that's another act of faithfulness that does not require us to be in our building. I want to close with a quote from Wilda Gaffney, whose lectionary we are using this year. She wrote this about the Feast of the Epiphany. The light of Epiphany is the light of God's love shining in and through the world and the Word throughout the Scriptures. In this season, we will see the light of God shining in and through Christ, God's love made manifest. It is a season of revelation. God and God's love are being continually revealed in the world of the text and in the world that reads it and hears it. Sometimes it will be hard to see the light, to keep it kindled, and the hope it represents with it. Shadows and sorrows encroach. No matter how bleak the gloom that overshadows, even the deepest dark of night is a resting place for the rising of the dawn. My prayer in this new year is that we will see that dawn rising every day and bravely, together, from our separate spaces, step out into it. God with us.